if you remember the last episode,
Yes.
I had my sleeper team of the East.
We. I was a part of that conversation too. I will bring up the evidence that we
We need to bring up
both.
the evidence because I've been on the Miami Heat bandwagon. I said if I there's something about that team.
Woo! It's the boy, Bubba, let's coming through. Hella clutch, flawless, can't be touched. It's your boy, Bubba, let's. Yeah, I need that hot take. I need the truth and everything that is not fake. So tell me who's the goal.
Welcome back, Bubba Bunch, to another edition of the Bubba Let's Sports podcast. This is episode 160, the big 160 Navarro.
That's good.
I know.
I'm trying to see if I can go ahead and come up with some kind of association with 160, and I have nothing.
You know, I thought about that, in the last day or so, just because I knew it was coming. I'm not that smart, so I gave up a long time ago on that. But let's move on. But here we are, back with a fan favorite in Navarro, Alex Navarro. How you doing?
I'm okay. There's a lot going on right now. It's actually kind of nice. I mean, we kind of, I guess we timed it a little bit nice to the point that we can wait until Milwaukee and the Miami Heat can end their game too.
Yes.
And then, in a couple of weeks we got football starting, and then the whole thing with the Big Ten now. I think so. I think Dan Patrick. I was listening to Dan Patrick this morning, and he ended up saying that we're actually going to have a true Big Ten because not every
right.
not every team's going to play. Not every team's going to play. So it's interesting that we're this may be the year that we do get a true Big Ten. But he also said he's like this may also be the year that you really just kind of have the ones in that conference who have a chance to win. And in other words, that have a chance to go ahead and compete for the national championship. And my understanding is Wisconsin actually has a really good chance. So I know Wisconsin and Ohio State. They were the two Big Ten schools that were pushing for the Big Ten to see if they can go ahead and play this year. So they haven't told. So we have a lot of sports, which is actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to talk about basketball playoffs now.
Yeah. As we're recording this, Game 2 of Milwaukee and Miami just ended, and that fourth quarter was something else. It really was. That's something to really remember at the tail end of this season. But
well, if you think about it, let's go back to the Utah Jazz and the Denver Nuggets the day before.
Well, not just Game 7. Game 7 was actually pretty different from the rest of the series. It was a low-scoring affair, kind of more defensive, and you could sense the fatigue out of both teams.
Yeah, you could. I mean, even at the end of the game, those guys were just kind of dragging up the court. But we're talking about the fourth quarter, and then you look at it, and you see how Denver and Utah, whenever they end up getting the ball, Denver's pushing the ball up the court. They end up missing the layup. Then they come back down, and then Conley misses that three.
Oh, in and out.
Go ahead and send the team to the next round. Oh. So that was an exciting fourth quarter. And then we see this mess that we call the Milwaukee and Miami Heat at their fourth quarter, where it becomes kind of like, well, we'll kind of see who the refs are going to go ahead and, I guess, in a sense, bail out. You can argue the first call against Chris Middleton on that jump shot. You can argue it.
Yes.
You can argue it. Obviously, you can split hairs and say maybe. But how do you call a foul with no seconds left on the clock? You send that game into overtime. But essentially, the refs ended up taking that game away from the Milwaukee Bucks, which I'm not mad about.
No.
Because if you remember the last episode,
yes,
I had my sleeper team of the East.
I was a part of that conversation too. I will bring up the evidence that
we need to bring up the evidence because I've been on the Miami Heat bandwagon. I said there's something about that team that they have. It's okay. So we bring up the OKC and the Houston game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we bring up the OKC and the Houston game, there was Mark Jackson was talking about it this morning, and he said, I know you mentioned it. He's like, I don't want to see this 3-point shooting contest that Houston just kind of does.
Yeah. And
Mark Jackson brought up something interesting. He said, okay, so if the 3-point shot's not going in, what's your plan B? And see, with D'Antoni and the Houston Rockets, they don't have a plan B.
They don't.
They have a plan A through C, and then A through Z, everything is the 3-point shot. I think the over under on the 3-point attempts tonight for the Houston Rockets is 45.
They'll beat that.
Yeah,
I'm taking
yeah.
the
And
over.
I'm wondering, and it's interesting because I'm looking at that and I'm like, okay, so then you look now. Let's go ahead and use that in comparing the Miami Heat because the Miami Heat shoot a lot of threes,
Yes.
not to the extent that Houston does. But what's interesting is they also have a plan B. So if the 3-point shot's not going in, at that point, what can they do with their plan B? So you have Jimmy Butler. I think more than anything, I know Jimmy Butler brings. He's an excellent player, but I think it brings a toughness to that team because if you take Jimmy Butler away from that team, you have a good team. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think you have a formidable team, and I think Jimmy Butler makes a big difference, which goes back to last year with Philadelphia. Remember, he was
Yes.
in Philly
Yeah.
and he was trying to toughen up that team, and guess what happened? It imploded. He goes and signs with Miami, and then look what happened to the 76ers this year.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. We'll get into the 76ers because we're going to kind of
Yeah.
recap the first round and then talk a little bit about the second round. But I think tonight was actually a good indicator of how tough this Miami Heat team is because you got to think about it. Without those free throws at the end that Jimmy hit to win the game, he
Yes.
only had what 2 to 4 points in the second half.
Something. Yeah.
He was I think 3 of 8
Yeah.
in the second half, and going from a game of 40 in game one, which isn't like Jimmy Butler that we've seen in Miami. He's typically a
No.
21, 22 point per game guy, which is enough for a team like that. But to go to 40 and then go down to 8 for most of the game and get maybe 12 at the end, but still win a game against one of the best teams in the East, and it's because of the defense that they played. And that's all. That's Dragic. That's Jay Crowder, who I think is one of the most important players in this
Yeah.
series. But it's not going to be on the stat sheet. It's what you see
Yeah.
in the eye, and what he's
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
against
He does that
Giannis.
for you.
It's amazing.
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
But I'll give. Well, let's take it a step further. So then you're talking about. I remember somebody brought up. It's like, well, who do the Lakers want to match up with in the West? And they said it doesn't really matter. It's like those two teams who are going to go ahead and play against them. It's going to be OKC. It's going to be Houston. They're going to have to worry about how they're going to match up against the Lakers because they have AD who at 6'10", 6'11", is an anomaly. He can do a lot of things for you. And then you have LeBron James. So the Lakers really aren't worried about who they're going to match up against. But OKC or Houston has to worry about how they're going to match up against the Lakers.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's look at the Heat. So you have all those perimeter players, which are excellent.
Yes.
And then now you throw in someone who can match up against Giannis and Bam Adebayo.
Yes.
He can match them, we're not talking about complete to the point that you're going to shut them down. No, these are professional players. Giannis is going to probably end up winning the MVP back to back, but you have an opportunity here where you have Bam Adebayo that can slow him down enough that offense is going to struggle. So it's interesting. They ended up showing they showed a clip where they're picking up Giannis, they're picking up early, and then they're building a wall. And then once they're building a wall, sometimes that wall was up to 4 players to go ahead and build. But once you kind of stop that momentum, and he has to have the opportunity to set up. At that point, what's happening is then Miami's getting into their defensive rotation, which is it's an excellent strategy, and I think a lot of the credit has to go to Eric Spoelstra.
Yes.
When Spoelstra had LeBron, D Wade, and then they had Chris Bosh. In a sense, you were expected to win. You were expected to win, and look at them now. Now you have an opportunity to go ahead and beat the Bucks. Even if the Heat don't do anything this year, even if the Heat get to the Eastern Conference Finals, the NBA Finals, and they don't win, you have to look at the Heat and what they're doing and the talent they're putting together as a prohibitive favorite going into the future. And again, I think their biggest contract is Jimmy Butler's. I can't recall another guy who's got a big contract on that team. Even Jay Crowder doesn't have a big contract on that team.
No, they got him cheap.
Yeah, they got him cheap, and then Tyler Hero's a rookie, so you're still going to go ahead and pay him for the next 3 to 4 years, or for the next at least 3 years on a rookie contract. You got Duncan Robinson that they ended up finding, and this guy, lo and behold, becomes one of the best shooters in the
Yeah,
NBA.
very efficient.
So yeah, so you got a very young team, and now there's. I remember I was watching the end of the game right now, or I went on Twitter, and there's going to be the whisper, of course, that Giannis. What do you do? He can opt out after he can walk after next year. So does he walk into a team like the Miami Heat, where you essentially have all the pieces already there, ready to go? There's no other max contract except Jimmy Butler's. You bring him in, and then now what do you have? It's that's the big thing
Yeah,
with him. It's like you got to find out how you're going to go ahead and keep Giannis happy in Milwaukee. So it's going to be interesting. So I think the Heat, by what they're doing, there's a huge shift. It's 2 games. It's two
right.
games, and nobody's got home court advantage in any of these games. But it's 2 games, so let's see Budenholzer, and let's see how he's going to go ahead and adjust to what Miami's been doing so far against the Heat. I mean, against the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah. We'll wrap up the Milwaukee talk with this, but I said the first time that we predicted the playoffs was I saw an undisciplined Milwaukee team. That's where I felt they were going, and I didn't
Okay.
see the bubble seeding games as a 50 plus 60 plus win Bucks team that we were seeing in the regular season prior to COVID. So I was seeing a lot more of down the stretch they cannot finish, they cannot execute, and
Mm,
I felt the same thing in the first 2 games in the Miami Heat series. We don't have to worry about Orlando. Orlando got game 1, fine. They just caught him
yeah,
slipping. And then
yeah,
Milwaukee came back, and that's good. But Orlando's not going to be a threat. Miami will be a threat, and I feel like down the stretch when we're seeing Jimmy dropping 40 and we're seeing this defense by Jay Crowder, Adebayo, and Jimmy Butler coming down to, and Dragic as well. He stayed in there with those passes on the inbound. Like, they stuck through it, and I don't think Milwaukee stuck through it to the end, and they make dumb mistakes. I get it. That second call by Giannis may not have been called on a regular basis,
sure.
but to even put your hands on him, you don't want to risk it.
Yeah, because at that point you're giving the ref an opportunity to make that
Yes.
call.
And
Yeah,
plus,
he wasn't gonna make that fade
that's a
two-pointer
tough
from the corner.
shot. It was a very tough
That's a
shot.
tough shot. What are the odds of that going in? And yeah, and Jimmy Butler's not he's not Tyler Hero on that team where almost any angle is a good angle for him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And in a league that is very well known for saying, oh, if we call it on this side, we're going to call it on the other side just to make up for
yeah,
it. They're very good about that. That's that good thing about the refs. They will make up for it. And they
yeah,
did. It just didn't work out in the favor of the Bucks.
yeah,
So now we have Miami up 2-0, and we both said it. We think Miami is a threat. And
they are.
I like watching them play. I like them.
Yeah,
I like them a
they are.
lot.
Yeah, and I'm
So
even thinking about let's look forward in terms of the Raptors and the Celtics right now.
I mean, we both thought Toronto was the opponent going into the Eastern
Yeah,
Conference Finals. It was going to
yeah,
be on that side of the bracket. Like, Toronto looks really good, and they're very deep. They look to be like they were last year, only better without Kawhi. But Boston, what they're
yeah,
doing is, I love Boston. Their roster is future proof, and we're all saying like, hey, the future is promising in Boston. I think what those players are doing and what Brad Stevens is doing is like, well, the future's now. We're not worrying about
yeah.
5 years from now. Future is now.
Well, he doesn't have a choice. So you got Marcus Smart's coming out of his contract this year. I don't know if you're going to want to go ahead and give him max.
It's tough.
He,
No,
I don't know if you're going to want to give him max. I think you have 2 guys there that you're going to want to go ahead and make sure that you get a max. You got Jaylen Brown and you got Jason Tatum.
hmm
Jason Tatum, remember he was passionate about Kobe. So what's to say that he ends up resigning with Boston? Boston's going to go ahead and offer him the max, of course. They're going to offer Jaylen Brown the max. They're not going to offer Marcus Smart. So I think it's interesting because I think Boston has to figure it out, I think, within the next 2 years. Because I look at it's interesting because if you look at Boston and you look at Miami, they're built very similar. It's
yes,
almost kind
they're
of like
young.
they have a team of really good forwards. If you
hmm
look at it, I mean, so you look at those 2 teams, and can we say that Boston's closer Then Miami, I think both of those two teams are strong. I'm actually surprised that Boston went up 2-0 on
Yes.
Toronto.
Yeah.
I am surprised. I thought for the most part the first two games were going to go ahead and get a split. So you got to give Brad Stevens a little bit of credit, which is interesting because once you got rid of Kyrie, they became a team. And Kyrie has all the talent in the world. But
Mm-hmm.
see, the thing is with Kyrie, you have to have an alpha on that team. So whenever he played with Cleveland, he had LeBron.
Mm-hmm.
When LeBron left, Kyrie created problems.
Yes.
So now he's in Brooklyn. You have Kevin Durant. So because of the fact that you have Kevin Durant, that dynamic may work because of Kevin Durant. He let him be the alpha. Let Kyrie just go ahead and fit right in. He can be alpha one. It's okay, but he needs that alpha to go ahead and make sure. Because if you allow Kyrie and the Flat Earth Society to go ahead and do whatever the hell they want, at that point you're the I guess you can go off the rails kind of fast. I'm
Um,
checking in 6 minutes, six and a half minutes left. They're already at 23 point attempts.
Dear God. Um, I don't even want to talk about it. We have to. We got to get to the Western Conference. But so Boston, really like watching them in these first two games. How they're handling Siakam. Like Siakam is very limited in what he's doing, passing ability, scoring, the whole nine. Fred VanVleet's had a couple of rough games. So has Kyle Lowry. And that's where I feel like they're going to kind of fall if you do end up winning against the Raptors, is if their guard play isn't all there, especially Kyle Lowry, how he performed in the finals last year. This is where this team is going to fall. They're well coached, but they're kind of getting outmatched, and you feel that Boston's in their comfort zone, and they're in past years you could say, oh, they're just happy to be here. They're a really good team, but we'll see. Now it's like they're in control. And this 2-0 feels more confident in going Boston's way than Miami does against Milwaukee. Like you feel safer about Boston being like they can hold this one out. They can hold this lead.
And I'm going to go back to the point that you brought up with Kawhi. So, but Toronto's a really good team. They finished second in the East. So now you get to the playoffs, and they're still a really good team, but you don't have that one guy. Siakam has proven that he's not that one guy. So Fred VanVleet is proving that he's not that one guy. Kyle Lowry is proving that he's not that one guy. You're not going to rely on Marc Gasol to be that one guy. So that's going to be the one thing that I think it's going to hurt him is like, who is their one guy? Like last year it was Kawhi. So they went from being a really good team to a contender. So this year they're a really good team. And now in the playoffs, remember, you can do a lot of things in the regular season. The playoffs will expose you. So they're being exposed a little bit. So I'm kind of curious who ends up becoming that one guy. So we'll see. I hate saying it, but just the Celtics look really good. Obviously, as a lifelong Lakers fan, the Celtics look really good. It'll be kind of interesting that if the Lakers and the Celtics eventually can go ahead and meet in the finals, right?
Yeah.
Kind of appropriate this year of all years.
Of course.
Yeah.
Let's just quickly mention the teams that were eliminated so far in the Eastern Conference. Orlando, they need a lot of work. The Pacers let go of their coach, surprisingly, even though
ridiculous move.
He got them far enough to where I feel like there's a lot of promise in Indiana, and you can't say that much, in their organization. But they have some
Indiana.
It's hard to come by for superstars in Indiana. And
you better draft really well. And Oladipo was coming back from injury,
of course,
and they just extended McMillan.
Yeah,
he must have just kind of gone in there and said something to irritate someone, because you don't move away from a name McMillan after giving him a contract extension, barely getting Oladipo back, trying to go ahead and get him into the mix, and all of a sudden you release him. Come on.
Yeah, especially against a Miami team that
McMillan's
a lot of people are underwhelmed by. Are we done with the process in Philly?
Yeah, we have
Yes.
to be. I think either Embiid or I think Embiid gets. I think he's going to eventually get moved. I think also there's a possibility that there's a title contender that may pick up Tobias Harris, but I think we are done with the process. I think the one they're going to go ahead and build around is going to be Ben Simmons. I think Joel Embiid's going to have to figure out how serious he wants to go ahead and take basketball, because if you look, he'll give you energy, but in the fourth quarter he just drags. And maybe that's a whole thing for big men, that it's kind of tough to just kind of move up and down the court for 4 quarters but it's I think the process is over. I think by the firing of Brett Brown, wasn't it? That was
Yeah,
kind of like the nail in the coffin.
look, I really gave up on the process when you were continuously going into every season thinking that Brett Brand's the answer because he was
Mm,
obviously not. I don't think he was a good enough coach for that talent, and especially that roster last year that not only had Jimmy Butler, Joel, Ben, who was improving last year, and
yeah,
also like JJ Redick, for many years, like they had a roster that they can go
yeah,
deep into the playoffs with, and Brett Brown just did not know how to use it.
yeah,
So I feel like having him in that environment was a toxic thing, and to now finally have him out, it's kind of too late. You everyone's given up, and
yeah.
I think that there's no process anymore. It's just you're a bad team, and you just didn't realize it until now.
Bring in
Because
McMillan. Bring in Nick McMillan.
look, I
He's a
wouldn't
good
doubt it. He's
coach.
a better coach than Brett Brown.
So I guess that's so I know that you're recording it. So now there's an opportunity to go. Let's go ahead and put it on. I guess let's go ahead and put it for the record. Who give me two people right off the bat. Two people right off the bat that you believe that can go ahead. I think Nick Miller's in the short list.
Ty Lue.
I just you know it's I just
I'm not super
yeah,
approved by that move, but Ty Lue is a very, you know, he is sought out by a lot of these teams
yeah,
just because of his success in Cleveland, and
yeah.
he's a great assistant coach. I love him as an assistant coach. I just don't know if he can take the realm as a head coach.
I think eventually you're gonna have to go ahead and look at also like a Mark Jackson.
Oh, I
Wondering if he's
would.
gonna have an
Ooh,
opportunity to
that'd
get
be
back into the
nice.
league. Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if he's going to get back into the league. And what's interesting, look at what Steve Kerr said. Steve Kerr, one time they ended up asking him about how Golden State plays good defense. He's like, that's got nothing to do with me. Mark Jackson taught him how to play defense.
Yeah, he kind of
So
laid the roots to
he
that.
laid the foundation for that
Yes.
team. So and then obviously whenever you know how to play defense, and then you bring in the two of the greatest shooters of all time and put them on the team at the same. Actually, three of the greatest shooters of all time,
Mm-hmm.
and you put them at the team. You put them on the team at the same time. Yeah, that actually gets to be pretty good.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think McMillan, I think Teron Lou, um, I think Mark Jackson. That's my short list. Outside looking in, maybe Jason Kidd. I don't. I still
Yeah.
don't think he's ready.
Oh, you could do Tom Thibodeau too.
Didn't Tom Thibodeau sign in New York?
Has he already?
Yeah, didn't he sign in New York?
I
Double
know
check.
they interviewed him, but I never got word that he
We'll
had
double
signed.
check that later.
Yeah. Um, well, another coaching spot that would be interesting is Brooklyn, the last team that we haven't talked about in the Eastern Conference, who I know we kind of make fun of them because we think that like they're just a group of misfits and they're just put together. But they are getting KD, they are getting Kyrie next season, and they have the interim coach, but we don't know who's solidified as that main guy uh, holding
Yeah,
together that roster. But they showed that they can score. They
yeah.
can score against some of the defensive teams, especially Toronto. Like they didn't win a game, but I mean they kept up.
They
And
kept up with so many of their own players out.
yeah,
So it's I well, what about Jacques Vaughn? I mean, it wasn't Jacques the interim there?
yes, and
So I
there is conversation about him staying and being the full on coach, but I've
they
heard
played
Ty
hard.
Lue a lot.
They played hard for Vaughn. So what's to say that it's interesting is it kind of always goes back to it's kind of like the old saying, somebody you're gonna wait for somebody else to date you first, so that way you become certifiable, as opposed to like no, in other words, you don't want to be that one person to take a chance on this person. So that's sometimes with coaching also. Jacques Vaughn had an opportunity as an interim. His players proved that they can play hard for him.
Hmm.
Now Ty Lue's won. So Ty Lue's certified as a winning coach in the NBA. He's won his championship, and Jacques Vaughn hasn't. But I think you have enough talent. Remember, the NBA is going to be a players' league anyway. If you have the talent, you can do something. It's
Yes.
just a matter of crunch time. That's like kind of like what Nick Nurse can do, or kind of like what Billy Donovan can do. It's those crunch time moments of how can you go ahead and squeeze out those plays right at the end of the game. in order to be able to go ahead and get the difference between a win and a loss.
Mm-hmm.
Can Ty Lue do that? Can Jacques Vaughn do that? I don't know. Jason Kidd can't. Luke Walton can't.
Yeah, I wouldn't
They're
trust
they're
that.
not built. They're those former players that aren't built to aren't they're not built for the X's and O's. They're not.
I completely agree with that for sure. But Brooklyn's something to keep an eye on for sure. It may
Yeah.
take some time, but we'll see. Let's move on to the Western Conference because we're kind of short on time. We do like to talk. So Lakers 4-1 series win against Portland. Portland put up a good fight. I think just having to play all those seeding games to get in really took a toll on them.
Yeah.
I like their roster. They played really well. It's just the Lakers finally showed up, in my opinion. Like, they're not all there, but it was enough with Kuzma, with Davis, LeBron. Danny Green actually hit some shots. Alex Caruso is just an amazing player to me. Like, defensively, he's so efficient, and I love him.
And that's the one thing that whenever Avery Bradley opted out of the bubble, they ended up saying that they ended up losing their best perimeter defender.
Absolutely.
They did, but check this out. They did a stat earlier, right with the bubble's beginning. They did a stat that said the best two, the top 5 perimeter defending guards in the NBA. Avery Bradley was number 2, and Caruso was number 5. So whenever you look at those, whenever you look at those numbers, it's like, so they have Caruso. They also have KCP. KCP can also play defense for you, and then he was also hitting big shots.
Yes.
Kuzma somehow found the fountain of defense somewhere.
Yeah.
When he's been able to go ahead and help out. So again, I'm always going to go back to the one team that I'm kind of curious about is going to be the Clippers. Who are they? Because at this point, you better start having chemistry. It's funny because the Clippers are significantly more talented than the Nets. The Nets play better as a team than the Clippers. Because the Clippers, for whatever, why does it always feel like there's a piece missing? Like they just can't put it together. They always feel like there's a piece missing.
Yeah. So we'll actually get into that because we know who they're going to be going against in the second round. Denver winning Game 7 on just an amazing fourth quarter and an amazing series. Look, I'll make this quick. Jamal Murray is special. I don't know how he'll go down in the books. What if he continues this and he goes down as a really great player that it just gets it done in the clutch. Like he showed as a young guy, and that team is young too with Michael Porter Jr. too.
What a great player also. Wow.
They're just like freaks. And the emotional post-game interview that he did after Game 6 to get to Game 7, I mean, that was incredible to watch. And they played a really good Utah Jazz team that just seems to always miss it, just always seems to get close but not close enough.
Yes.
Donovan Mitchell's going to get the max contract soon. But, great series. Denver goes up against the Clippers because the Clippers get 4-2 over the Dallas Mavericks, who put up a fight even without Kristaps Porzingis for most of that series. And yes, I did feel like there is something missing, and a lot of that was Paul George. Paul George just somehow doesn't step up to the plate and feels like he's just kind of out there as a decoy. But you're talking about a great defensive team, and you got really great players like Patrick Beverley, who is injured, so we'll see what happens. Lou Will, I forgot his name.
Montrezl Harrell.
Harold, yes, thank you.
Harrell,
yes.
Montrezl Harrell inside. So they're a good team. They're well coached, but it just, for whatever reason, it just kind of feels like something is not coming together for them. But we said the same thing about the Lakers coming into the bubble. Like whenever they played those 8 games, and then you look at them, you're like, what the heck's wrong with the Lakers? But then you look at them against Portland, and all of a sudden it looks like they figured it out. So we'll see. I'm curious to see what happens. I mean, obviously their first game is going to be Friday. Do we say that their first game is Friday at home? No, we don't say that.
I hate this home and away thing. Like, you're just putting crowd noise. That's all you're doing.
Yeah, you're putting somebody hit the 3-pointer. You're doing like that whole thing where everybody's sitting.
They're doing the free throws and everyone's like,
yeah, and everybody's like this, yeah.
But it's delayed, so after the free throws happen, that's when they start doing it, and you're like, what's the point?
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
say that the way that the Clippers kind of struggled, because that series could have gone 7,
Yeah.
depending on how the refs called it in game 1. So the Clippers struggled with defending Luka, and if Kristaps was in there for a majority of that series, I think it would have been, a lot more difficult. So if you look at Denver, you look at who you have to defend. Jamal Murray, who is also just a great offensive scorer and efficient. This man goes 17 of 24 and scores 50. He's not just a volume shooter like a lot of these guys are in the NBA. He is efficient and is smart with his shots. So
Yeah.
you get someone like Luka with Jamal Murray. I'm not saying Jamal Murray's better, but it's very similar on how they play. But you also have a better big man down low in Jokic, who may cause a problem down low for the Clippers. So what could have been against Dallas, I think, is now what the Clippers do have to deal with against Denver, which is a better
Yeah.
matchup.
Yeah, and then you have remember we keep forgetting that we're not even mentioning the Joker. So you got Jokic inside. He's one of the better passing big men in the league. So you have him, you have Jamal Murray, you have Michael Porter Jr., you have Gary Harris. So you have Denver. Well, also Denver shouldn't surprise anybody. Denver came in as a 3 seed,
Yes, they were
so
good. They were
they
good.
were
They're
good.
consistent.
Yeah, they were good, and they're also coached. They're well coached.
Hmm.
So I'm curious to see what the Clippers do with what the Clippers end up doing against Denver. I just want Denver to have just give them a series
Yeah,
because I'm kind of curious what ends up happening with either Oklahoma City or Houston. I think that's going to be over in 5 or 6 games. I'm thinking that Clippers and Denver are going to go 7. So it'll give maybe the Lakers an opportunity to go out and just get a little bit more rest to go out
absolutely.
before they face the. I think it's still going to be the Clippers versus the Lakers. Those are my 2 teams that are going to advance. I still think now I'm looking at that. I'm thinking it's going to be the Celtics against the Heat.
Which
I'm going to
is
love that match.
it's
That's going to be
amazing. I
tremendous.
am so excited for that if that's the case.
Yeah, and then we'll see what happens in the finals. It'll be kind of interesting. But those are kind of like I think those are my last 4 teams standing.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree, and nothing really shocking other than the Boston series and how good they're playing. Other
Yeah,
than that, I feel pretty confident in Miami, and then the Western Conference looks pretty nice to and pretty much obvious from what we've seen. I think Denver's going to give Clippers a good test, and
hmm
LA will squeeze by. Um, who do you have, Houston or OKC coming out of Game
I
7?
have I have OKC. Even
Okay.
though Houston's up right now, they're up 4 right now before 26 seconds to go in half.
Yeah.
But I have OKC.
I
There's
ha-
something I have OKC coming out almost just because of the fact that I agree with you. I hate that 3-point barrage. I think it's just it almost kind of feels like it's dirty basketball. Like I don't want to
yes.
see that.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that. There's no strategy behind it.
Um, I do think the Rockets will win Game 7,
Okay.
and move on to the Lakers. But I think either matchup for the Lakers is a favorable one because they're going to be banged up, they're going to be tired, and matchup wise, there's no way that Houston matches up well against LA. And OKC, they're really focused on their guard play, and without it, if
Yeah.
Steven Adams can step up, maybe, but it's going to be a lot to ask for OKC. Look,
Yeah.
I don't want to see Houston. I just don't want to see 60 3-point attempts in a game. I just don't want to see it.
It's on its way. It's halftime and you have 33-point attempts by Houston.
I should have taken that bet. That's an over under. That's an easy $100 right there. If it was Clint Capella on Houston, I think it would be different. I think if they would have kept Clint Capella, things would have been a lot different. But Mike D'Antoni can't run that system with a big man.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you'd rather have PJ Tucker in the corner that can make those threes, but it's not going to get him far, in my opinion.
Remember, Amari Stoudemire is at D'Antoni's version of a big man. He needs
Yeah,
somebody who can run the floor,
that
and Capella doesn't do that for you.
I mean, it's just a matter of like, look, you can go small, but until a guy like Anthony Davis just comes in and takes over against PJ Tucker and has a
Yeah,
foot on him, it's a whole different ball game.
yeah,
So
that's good. Yeah, it's gonna hurt.
yeah, just went a little bit over because we talk a lot, but this will do it for our basically update on the NBA playoffs. Hopefully, we can do some more soon. We'll see what happens, but thank you, Navarro, for coming in on a late night session and being a part of episode 160. So thank you for everyone that's watching and listening. Make sure to do all the things: YouTube, Spotify, podcast, Apple Podcast, and then you can actually subscribe to the podcast for $1, $5, or $10 a month just to support us and get us to 100 subs on YouTube. So thank you again, and we'll see you next time on the Bubble Let Sports Podcast.
Yeah, hold on. Tell me who's your top 5 quarterbacks right now, dead or alive, huh? And how much do you care about a ring if the best player got carried by the team? Now would you lose if it been a better draft pick? And do you cuss when your team get their ass kicked? Now do you keep it classy or you